Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. On behalf of the National Transit Institute, I welcome you and thank you for participating. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. Today's webinar is NTD 2020 Safety and Security Rail Mode Reporting. We are pleased to have as our presenters today Ann Singleton and James Overbeek. Ann Singleton is a Senior Safety and Security Analyst for the NTD program and has been since 2009. Ann has been involved with several FTA initiatives, such as the State Safety Oversight Program, the Commuter Rail Safety Study, and the Transit Bus Safety and Security Program in a variety of roles. Prior to Ann's work with FTA, she was a software instructor and a database developer. James Overbeek joined the NTD team in 2015. He is a graduate of Randolph-Macon College and currently works as a validation analyst for the Safety and Security module of the National Transit Database. Once the presentation starts, if you have a question, you can ask it at any time by typing it in the Q&A box. This is helpful because the person not speaking, either Ann or James, may be able to answer your question in real time. If not, we can always take a pause for any additional questions. If you don't see the Q&A box, you need to make your little menu show up on your screen, and there should be an option for Q&A as well as a chat box option. That would be in the Zoom controls. Hopefully you found it. I guess that's it. I pasted the link to the handouts if you didn't have it in the chat window. If it's not showing up again, I should be able to paste that again, hopefully. And I guess without any further ado, I will turn the presentation over to Ann.
All right, well, we'll just keep on going. I think we know the goal of today's session is that to try and get you guys all familiarized with the reporting requirements and the reporting forms. So that's the goal. So let's continue on. Excuse me. So again, today we're going to talk about accessing the NTD system. We're going to give you a little overview of the NTD system and navigation, of course, the setup and security, how that's achieved within the system, and again, some more navigation. The 2020 reporting clarifications and the form changes that have been incurred. And then we're going to go over the various forms, the CEO Certification form, S&S-20 Security Configuration form, non-major summary report form, the S&S-20, and the S&S-40 major event form. As Lori mentioned earlier, James and I are your instructors for today. Also, once the slide comes up, you'll see that we also have a Murtaza Nakvi, the NTD program manager, and Joseph Eldridge is our NTD operations center manager, but to the best of my knowledge, neither one of those are attending today. We will be showing our email addresses again. Oh, and one note, you'll see here for Joseph Eldridge's email, I clearly left out the R in his email address. So if you do need to email Joseph for any reason, spell it like his last name is spelled. And I apologize for that error. Okay, so again, we're going to start off with a brief overview, and what I'm going to do is turn this over to James right now. Maybe he'll have more luck advancing than I. And James will get us started, and then I'll talk to you guys a little bit later. James?
Thanks, Ann. Yeah, so as Ann mentioned, we will first have a brief overview of the NTD program, and then how to navigate through the system.
Is it working? I don't know what's going on with my computer. Oh, you got it.
In 1974, Congress established the National Transit Database Program as a means to collect information and statistics on transit systems in the United States. The first data was collected in 1979 with paper reports. Since then, the NTD has evolved into the nation's primary source of information and statistics on transit systems. All modes of transportation are included in NTD data. Agencies that are recipients or beneficiaries of Urbanized Area Formula Program Funds 5307 and 5311 are required to report data with some exceptions. Both public and private providers are encouraged to voluntarily report, as this will increase federal grant allocation that the urbanized area receives. All reporters designated as full reporters are required to report monthly safety and security events meeting a threshold. Agencies designated as small systems or rural, tribal report safety and security data on an annual basis rather than a monthly basis. Agencies who have requested a reporting waiver due to a significant natural disaster are not required to report for the period of the waiver. The data reported to NTD is used to provide industry performance reports to Congress and other federal agencies and departments, and is used to factor federal funding allocations for the UZAs, which was over $9 billion last year. The data is also used to direct, support, or improve other FTA program initiatives, such as State Safety Oversight Program. NTD data is also used to generate various analyses of trends in transit safety and security. The safety and security data is published on a monthly basis and is available to the general public on the NTD webpage. The data is accessed by federal and state agencies, transit systems, media, or any interested parties. Published data can be found on the NTD website under the NTD data link. There are two main data products, Safety and Security Time Series data and the Safety and Security Major Only Time Series data file. When an agency submits a form, the safety analyst reviews and validates the report using a combination of various validation tools. In addition to these tools, S&S-20 forms are read by the analyst to compare the event description against data points. If the analyst has questions or requests corrections, the analyst typically returns the form to the agency, but may also call or email the reporters. Once corrections are made, the analyst re-reviews the forms and will approve the submission if applicable. When you make changes to a report, be sure to submit the form. Saving without submission does not alert the analyst to the change. This step is particularly important with the new SSOR program. If the form is not resubmitted, the change does not appear in the SSOR. On a side note that we cannot say often enough, always notify your analysts when you delete a report and why. We must keep track of each report, even those that have been deleted. Each form and report has different deadlines. The S&S-20 monthly summaries are due on the last day of each month for the previous month's data. For example, the March report is due April 30th. However, Commuter Rail modes and Alaska Railroad do not report on the S&S-20 form. The NTD system sends automated email reporting reminders to the safety contact on the 20th of each month. This is not a late notice, just a reminder to report. The NTD system sends automated late notices on the 1st and 5th of each month if your data has not been submitted. Please note that a report that has been saved but not submitted is considered late. When late notices are sent, it is quite common for us analysts to receive calls from the reporter saying they know they completed their report. This may be true, but if there is no submit date, the system generates the late notice. So if you get a notice, please check to ensure all reports are submitted. On the 15th of the month, if data is still outstanding, a third late notice is sent by the analyst. FTA may initiate the delinquent reporter process and add the agency to FTA's failure to report list. If there are extenuating circumstances why you cannot report, please advise your safety analyst. Also, in light of the current COVID-19 situation, all automated late notices and analyst-sent late notices have been suspended for the time being. FTA is encouraging agencies to report or to make a reasonable effort to report if possible. Please just keep in touch with us about your ability to report the monthly data. Failure to report required data can have severe consequences and could affect the program funding. A failure to report can be submitted by an analyst to FTA for a variety of reasons, such as delinquent S&S-50s. If the year-end CEO certification is 45 days late, habitual delinquent reports has incomplete S&S-20s that do not comply with reporting requirements, or fails to respond to validation inquiries. When you need to access the website, your username is your email address in all lowercase letters. The agency's user manager establishes a person's user role in the system. The user manager is also the point of contact if you need to have your user role changed. There are 6 access levels for NTD reporting. The CEO, CEO delegate, and NTD contacts have the highest level of access and full functionality to include the NTD annual forms, monthly ridership, and safety and security data. The main difference between the two CEO accesses and NTD contacts is the CEOs and delegates can submit the agency certification form. NTD editors, shown only as editor in the system, can edit annual forms and could submit monthly ridership and safety and security forms. The safety contact can create, edit, delete, save, and submit S&S forms. The safety editor can create, edit, and save, but not submit safety data, and safety viewers can only view data. None of the safety contacts can change annual or ridership data. A person must be uniquely identified in only one role. The designated contacts are responsible for reporting data accurately and responding to questions about submitted data. Automated emails such as reminders and late notices are sent to the safety contact. If there is no safety contact, these are sent to the NTD contact. The email address listed as the last modified user will receive notices of forms that are returned for questions or changes. Users can change the password as often as they like, but the system requires a new password every 60 days. Passwords must be at least 12 to 20 characters, comprised of at least one uppercase letter, one lowercase letter, one number, and/or one special character. If the user ID has not been used for 60 days, the system will lock that user ID. If you get locked out, click on the Reset Password link located beneath where you enter your login. If you forget your password and you are not locked out, you will see a Forgot Password link instead of a Reset Password link. If you require further assistance, please contact the NTD Help Desk or your safety analyst. The National Transit Database is accessed from the Federal Transit Administration website. This is a snapshot of the NTD homepage on the FTA website. Please notice the link to the NTD reporting tool. On the left side, you will notice several links which we will discuss on the next few slides. The first of these links is about the NTD section, which contains an overview of the NTD program, contact information, and help desk contact information. The NTD data section provides access to time series products for historical and current annual data, monthly ridership data, and safety and security statistical information. The safety and security time series is often used for peer comparisons. You will also find agency profiles in the National Transit Summaries and Trends annual products. Under reference materials, you'll find the NTD glossary, policy manuals, quick reference guides, information on training and conferences, presentations and webinars, and an explanation of all forms used in NTD reporting. Accessing NTD. When you click on the report tool link we showed earlier, the first screen that appears is depicted here on the left. Once you click on Agree to the disclaimer, the boxes for you to enter your username and password are presented. Your username is your business email address. Here you would see the reset password or forgot password link as well. Once you complete the login, this is a snapshot of the default screen. You will notice there are menu options in the blue bar across the top. The default screen shows you just saw was the news menu option. Here you will find a variety of announcements and items of interest. The next menu item is the task menu. which shows you how many tasks are in your queue. Tasks are things that you need to do. For example, one of the tasks you may have is to manage any pending or incomplete S&S reports. The Records menu item is where you will go most of the time. This is where you access the safety reporting packages. The Reports tab will display reports that are available to you. One such report would be the Historical Lookup Report to view safety and security data reported in prior years. Another report is the Rate Compared to Industry Rate Report, which will compute and compare your agency incident, injury, and fatality rates against the industry average. And finally, the Action menu item is used to add new users in addition to other actions. First, we will review safety and security setup and navigation. Safety and security packages automatically generated at the beginning of a new calendar year based on the agency's previous reporting status. Modes and types of service available in the safety module are determined by the agency's P20 profile form. If you see any unexpected changes to the modes or types of service, contact the person in your agency who submits the annual reporting data. If you do not know who that is, contact your validation analyst and we will look into it. Please do not attempt to modify the P20, as changes made here can affect all aspects of reporting and may cause data to be deleted. The safety packages gives you access to all safety and security reporting forms. The S&S-20 CEO Certification form submitted annually to certify reported data for the prior year, the S&S-30 Security Configuration form to report security personnel, access to create and edit any S&S-40 major event reports, and the S&S-50 non-major summary report forms for each month thus far in the year. As I mentioned, the Records tab is what safety and security reporters will access most of the time. Some of you may have noticed that the last week the screen changed to this new format from the former list format. You may also have noticed that the former working message you used to see when making a selection has been replaced with a status bar across the top of the screen. To report safety and security data, click on the NTD Safety Packages link. For most of the year, there will be 2 years available. However, for about the first quarter of the new year, there are 3 years open. To access your reporting form, as a reminder, you click on Records, then NTD Safety Packages, and choose the year in which you want to report data. When you complete those steps, the Safety Summary View displays. You see a confirmation of the reporting year, your agency ID number and name, your validation analyst name and email address, and your agency's fiscal year information. Below that, you see the form name filter box and used to limit the time which reports you see in the table below. In the table, you can sort by any of the columns presented to help in locating the form you wish. You can also use the browser's Find feature by doing Control F and enter the number of the major report you may be looking for. However, you must be on the right page to find it. Remember, you cannot open any of these forms or reports on this screen. You must first click on NTD Safety Forms button located in the upper right corner of the screen. The NTD Safety Forms button is used to access the dashboard where you can create a new report or edit or review an existing report. You can use the filter box here as well to restrict the view to the types of forms you want to see. Also, you can sort the columns as we already discussed on the summary view. When you find the report you want, click the blue link under the form name column to open an existing report. If the form is an S&S-40, the link will include the event number. When you are finished with the dashboard, click on Close. This is a snapshot of the dashboard that we just discussed. Notice the new status column. We will discuss this more later in the presentation. We have a few clarifications and form changes for 2020. This will be only an introduction. Each will be covered in more detail as we move through the presentation. Attempted suicide and mental health. There was no clear attempt and a person was transported only for mental health evaluation. This is reported on the non-major monthly summary report. We put a change in place in December regarding personally identifiable information. Please do not include any PII, such as names, addresses, badge or driver's license numbers, and so on. We will ask you to delete it or remove it from your event descriptions. However, do continue to include ages and genders. Rail vehicle collisions. A collision between two rail vehicles have been automatically reportable since 2015. For a brief period of time, we collected maintenance vehicle collisions as non-transit collisions, so we've also clarified non-rail collisions. So these clarifications are about how we collect the data, not reportability. We'll be discussing this in greater detail in the collision reporting section. Regarding the runaway train threshold, this is not a clarification, but rather a revision to the wording in the Safety and Security Policy Manual. The manual now more clearly states that this threshold applies only to revenue trains, not work trains or other maintenance vehicles. In 2019 and prior, the Transit Vehicle Involved form required you to choose the vehicle type and the fuel type from a list of all possible manufacturers and fuels. Beginning in 2020, the form now integrates with your agency's most current 830 revenue vehicle inventory form. This will provide more accurate data and reduce the number of reports returned for an incorrect selection. It also makes the form shorter. Earlier we reviewed the rail-to-rail collision reporting. In late 2019, we made one form change on setup screen 2 for rail modes to help in that clarification by changing the wording of 2 questions. We made slight changes to the vehicle involved question to include the statement regarding non-revenue rail vehicles. Also, the evacuation question was revised to exclude self-evacuations since they no longer meet a threshold beginning in 2018. Also, the artificial lighting option was changed to indoors for clarity, and we added a new weather selection of tunnel for accuracy. Earlier, I pointed out the status column on the summary view and dashboard. The status column replaced the former has data column. This launched around the end of June 2019 and is much more helpful to both reporters and analysts. There are 4 status levels you will see. The first is open. For S&S-30s and 50 forms, this signifies an available form for completion or forms that are not submitted, only saved. For S&S-40 forms, open represents forms that have only been saved. Submitted means that you are submitting the form to NTD for review. Returned means that your safety analyst has a question or change request, and this form requires attention from you. Approved means we have approved and accepted the form. S&S-50 forms will only show as approved if the form was returned, revised, and approved. This is a good point to mention that any open or unsubmitted S&S-40s or 50 forms will not be included in your S&S-20 CEO certification. So prior to certification, ensure all 2019 S&S-40s show submitted or approved. The comment box and forms also launched in 2019. Each form except the S&S-20 CEO certification contains a comment box at the bottom of the form that the safety analyst uses to ask for clarification or a change request. Each time the form is returned, it is time-stamped. We will discuss this more later in the presentation. That concludes the navigation. We'll now move on to the S&S-20 Safety and Security CEO form. The S&S-20 CEO Certification Form, the CEO or his or her designee to attestation to the accuracy of the major and non-major safety and security data for the previous calendar year. The form becomes available on January 15th in the previous year's safety package when the new year launches. The form automatically calculates data from submitted reports for the year. Unsubmitted data is not included. The form is due by the end of February of the following year, and only a person logged in as the CEO or CEO delegate can submit the form. Late notices are sent to the CEO. Data reporters should review their data to ensure it matches to the data in the S&S-20. Agencies should also use any in-house reports available to help verify the data. The historical lookup report on the Reports tab may be helpful as it shows incident counts by month. If the data does not match, check to ensure that all safety reports are submitted. Unsubmitted data is not included. You may add or delete S&S-40s or edit S&S-50 data, and the S&S-20 will automatically recalculate the numbers. Remember to always notify your safety analyst if you delete any data. You or your CEO will check the confirm boxes adjacent to the data. Then the CEO can click on Submit. Once the form is submitted, it cannot be resubmitted, but the form auto-calculates each time it is opened. This is a snapshot of the S&S-20 CEO Certification Form. We'll now talk about the S&S-30 form. The S&S Security Configuration Form collects the number and type of security personnel employed or contracted by your agency. The S&S-30 form is completed once at the beginning of the calendar year, and you are not required to update this form during the year. All S&S-30s must be completed and submitted to enable reporting. If you cannot create or edit an S&S-40 or 50, it is most likely because one or more S&S-30s is not submitted. This is a snapshot of the S&S-30 Security Configuration Form. Again, this does not represent actual data for the agency shown. Notice you have a place to enter the primary number of security personnel and the total number of security personnel, which is the primary and secondary added together. Do not leave either of these boxes blank. Below is a list of 7 types for security personnel with 2 columns to identify the type as primary or secondary. The primary security force is the one that routinely responds to events and or is assigned to patrol agency property. Please use a count of 0 for the use of local police non-contracted selection. The secondary security force is the one or ones that occasionally respond or responds when the primary force requires assistance. Again, for the use of local police non-contracted, use a count of 0. The number of personnel is reported in full-time equivalent hours. So 1 FTE equals 1 person working a 40-hour week or 2,080 hours per year. Prorate the number of personnel if the person works only part-time providing transit security, or they provide security for more than one mode. 1 S&S-30 is completed for each mode. Please be careful not to double count personnel. The number from the total number of security personnel box from each S&S-30 form should equal the total number of an agency's security personnel. Please see the example below. If your security force covers multiple modes, you may use any reasonable method for determining FTEs. That may be modal ridership or the number of employees covering a mode. If an agency contracts for security and pays a monthly fee based on services used, they should determine FTE based on a previous year's total hours worked. NTD allows for only one primary personnel type. If your agency has more than one type of security personnel it considers its primary, report the security force with the largest number of personnel as the primary and the smaller force as secondary. For further information on the S&S-20, please see the S&S policy on the NTD website or ask your analyst for assistance. We'll now look at non-major reporting. The definition of a reportable event is a safety or security event occurring on transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a maintenance facility, or rail yard, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle. These safety events must meet the single injury only threshold and are related to falls, electric shock, etc. Multiple injury incidents are bumped to a major report. The S&S-20 form also collects the number of non-major fires where there was no evacuation, injuries, fatalities, or substantial damage, but that still require suppression. OSHA events occurring in administrative buildings are excluded from reporting. The form is automatically generated for each mode and type of service at the beginning of each month. This form is required to be completed even if there was a major event for the month, as they capture different event types, and even if there is no data to report for the month. To recap, for submitting other safety incidents, you are entering the number of incidents and the matching number of injured parties. Please remember that injured means that they were transported away from the scene for medical attention, regardless of whether they appeared injured or not. Do not include people who were not transported away from the scene for medical attention on the S&S-20. There are some examples below of injuries reported on the S&S-20. This is a snapshot of the S&S-20 monthly summary report form. Two of the categories for injuries on the S&S-20 form relate to securement issues. Securement issues are those related to an injury resulting from improper securement of a mobility device such as a wheelchair or scooter. So they are reported as other in-vehicle securement issue. The other category is for other in-vehicle, not a securement issue. These are trips, slips while on the vehicle, or for being thrown from a seat during a vehicle maneuver. Again, if there's an undocumented attempted suicide and the person is transported for mental health, this is reported on the S&S-20. The S&S-20 can be modified at any time. Some reporters like to enter events as they occur during the month. For these reporters, they can modify the form and save and close the form after each change. Your validation analyst reviews each report for accuracy. If you have any questions, we may return the report to you, call or email you with our concerns. If the return feature is used, the user ID under the last modified user column will receive that email. I will now turn it back over to Anne to discuss major event reporting.
Thank you, James. Hopefully I can advance. Okay, maybe not. Okay, I see my buttons for a change. Oh, there it is. I think I got it. Okay. Excuse me. So first we're going to talk about the overall applicability of a major event as well as the reporting thresholds. A reportable event is a safety or security event, again, occurring on the transit right-of-way or infrastructure, at a transit revenue facility, at a transit maintenance facility or rail yard, during a transit-related maintenance activity, or involving a transit revenue vehicle and meets the reporting threshold. Okay, still not going to let me. James, can you advance for me, or can you still have ability? Okay. The exclusions have not changed from last year, so still events that occur off transit property where persons, vehicles, or objects come to rest on transit property after the event are excluded. OSHA events in administrative buildings, death from illnesses or natural causes, maintenance vehicle collisions while traveling to or from a related maintenance activity, or collisions involving a supervisor or transit police vehicle while operating on the public roads. So that's our overall applicability for all of the reports. Now we'll look at the individual reporting thresholds. They are a fatality, including suicides, one or more persons transported for medical attention or a serious injury, substantial property damage, evacuations of a transit facility or vehicle for life safety reasons or evacuations to the right-of-way, and all derailments, both mainline and yard derailments, are reportable. A collision involving a rail transit vehicle at a grade crossing, a collision between a rail transit vehicle and a person, regardless of whether the person is injured or not, collision between a rail transit vehicle and another rail transit vehicle, which includes both revenue or non-revenue and maintenance vehicles, such as high rail vehicles, and any incident involving a runaway train. So here's a few types of events that are not reportable. The first two listed are examples of events that occur off transit property. The last, medically related issues such as seizures or heart attacks or other illnesses or conditions are also not reportable to NTD. Some examples of reportable events. Part of the event definition stated, or the event applicability stated, involving a transit revenue vehicle. So if a vehicle is deadheading or out of service and it's involved in a collision that's meeting a reporting threshold, then it is reportable. Maintenance-related activities are included in reporting, as we just mentioned. Here you see a couple of examples of maintenance-related activities that are reportable. 2 railway workers injured in a manhole while providing maintenance on the infrastructure below the street level. Maintenance employee hit by a vehicle in the yard and is injured, or track worker suffers a fatal fall onto the tracks. Less severe injuries to maintenance workers are captured on the monthly S&S-20 summary report, along with your injuries to passengers and patrons. NTD also collects non-transit collision incidents, such as an accident in a transit parking lot that meets a threshold. A couple of examples would be a private vehicle colliding with a pedestrian, or a vehicle resulting in an injury, or a private vehicle colliding with transit property, such as a station, resulting in substantial damage or any other threshold. Also, non-revenue maintenance equipment, not vehicles. If equipment collides with anything other than a train, such as a high rail vehicle colliding with a person in the yard and the yard is injured. Non-revenue maintenance equipment collides with anything except it collides with an agency's train, is reported as a rail collision because it's involving a revenue train. So the first of our thresholds is a fatality, again, confirmed within 30 days of a related event. This includes transit-related suicides. Again, please don't include deaths from illnesses or other natural causes, or a person found deceased on transit property where it's confirmed that person wasn't struck by the train. There's 2 types of injuries. An injured person is a person that's transported immediately away from the scene for medical attention, which is considered a non-serious injury. This includes transport by ambulance and transport by private vehicle. An injury may be deemed a serious injury which does not require transport from the scene, however. Please note that the injury thresholds are different between rail and non-rail reporting modes. For non-rail modes, all injuries in this context would be considered non-serious. Serious injuries are defined by the following criteria, and you can see the list here. They require hospitalization for more than 48 hours, commencing within 7 days of the date of the event, results in a fracture of any bone except simple fractures, causes severe hemorrhaging, nerve, muscle, or tendon damage, involves an internal organ, or second or third degree burns affecting more than 5% of their body. Now, we get a lot of questions on how one is supposed to find out about hospitalization or injury severity with the current HIPAA regulations. Sometimes the agency will learn by the person or the person's family that was injured that the person was admitted to the hospital, especially if there may be legal action. If not, FTA expects only a reasonable effort to attain this information. We are working on some further guidance here regarding serious injuries, and we'll update the policy manual accordingly when that's finalized. The substantial damage threshold is defined, as you can see here. It's really a two-part system. Damage to any involved vehicles, facilities, equipment, rolling stock, or infrastructure that disrupts the operations of the Rail Transit Agency and adversely affects the strength, performance, operating characteristics, and so on, requiring towing, rescue, on-site maintenance, or immediate removal prior to safe operation. And we're going to look at this more closely in just a moment. Before we do, we'll first look at a couple of things that are excluded from the substantial damage. As you can see here, damage to cracked windows, dented, bent, or small puncture holes in the body, broken lights, broken mirrors, so on and so on. Also excluded from this is personal property such as laptops or cell phones, the cost of accident or criminal investigation, medical claims, litigation, etc. So at first glance, both the inclusions and the exclusions refer to on-site maintenance, and they both refer to removal from service. Also, almost all agencies have policies to remove vehicles from service for post-accident inspections or evaluations. When applying the substantial damage threshold, consider both parts of the substantial damage criteria, that it includes damage to vehicles or objects and on-site maintenance or removal from service prior to safe operation. The exclusions from service for minor repairs or maintenance does not refer to damage in this context. Removal from service due to post-accident inspections may be policy and not necessarily due to damage. Regarding the towing portion of the substantial damage criteria, this does not necessarily pertain to the towing of the train because we don't actually collect that information on the train form, but it does refer to other vehicles that are involved in the collision where the other vehicle is towed due to disabling damage in order to meet that threshold. Here's a couple of examples. There's a mid-block collision with no injuries, no fatalities, yet the car is towed away due to disabling damage. So on your setup screen 2, you would choose the substantial damage section, and then you would choose the option. There's 3 options when you get under there. You would indicate that there was damage to non-transit property only. And then when you get to the other vehicle form, you're corroborating that statement by checking the yes to the question, was this vehicle towed from the scene due to disabling damage as a result of the collision? Another example regarding towing, this does not pertain to towing here. This time the driver was transported, in this example, the driver was transported for medical attention and her vehicle was towed to remove it from the street. So this does not meet the substantial damage threshold, but the event does meet the injury threshold. So you'd report the event because of the injury threshold, but then you, on your question regarding substantial damage or regarding towing away due to disabling damage, you would select no, of course. Rail transit vehicle collisions at a grade crossing are automatically reportable. The collision could be with an auto, an object, an animal, or so on. A grade crossing collision is where rail tracks and a road or pedestrian pathway intersect. For systems running on mixed traffic such as all streetcar and many light rail systems, each street intersection is considered a grade crossing. A collision between a rail transit vehicle and a person is also automatically reportable regardless of injury or fatality. For example, if a pedestrian walks into the side of a moving train and is not injured, you report the collision with as a person, but you do not include the injury form. As a reminder, if a person bumps into a train that is not moving, it is reported as a slip and fall on the S&S-20 form. Rail-to-rail vehicle collisions are automatically reportable as a rail collision, including any configuration of two or more revenue or non-revenue vehicles. However, if a non-revenue vehicle collides with a person or an object, including rail equipment, the collision has to meet a reporting threshold. The table on this page is designed to assist you in how you report the rail-to-rail collisions and what types of vehicles to include. When you create a rail collision report, the collision event form requires you to enter how many transit trains are involved and how many other vehicles are involved. So you can see that in a revenue train to revenue train collision in this table, you would include 2 trains involved. For a revenue train collision to a high rail or other maintenance vehicle collision, you would include 1 train form for the train and 1 other vehicle form for the high rail vehicle. If there's a collision between 2 maintenance vehicles, you wouldn't include any trains. You would only include 2 other vehicle forms. All of these, though, meet that rail-to-rail reporting threshold. In the last row of this table, when you see that a work train or a maintenance vehicle collides with a person or an object or rail equipment, such as a flat car that is not attached to a vehicle, that the event is still reported as a rail collision, but it has to have a threshold met, such as property damage or injury, to be reportable. The runaway train threshold applies only to revenue trains that are either in or out of service. So we're not including work trains in this guidance. Also, the policy manuals have been updated to more clearly state that this threshold does apply only to revenue trains. It was a little ambiguous before, so we cleaned that up. So runaway work trains or maintenance vehicles would not be considered a runaway train. Agencies are required to report all derailments, both mainline and those occurring in the yard, regardless of meeting any other threshold. This includes derailments of trains, in revenue or non-revenue service, and maintenance vehicle derailments. All events involving a runaway train are always reported under the event type, which could be a collision, could be a derailment, or it could be an other safety event. All evacuations for life safety reasons or evacuations to the rail right-of-way are reportable, including those directed by an authority or police, or that could have been a customer self-evacuation. An evacuation for life safety means that there's imminent danger to all people in that environment. Self-evacuations are where customers vacate the property without direction of the transit agency or other authority. Again, self-evacuations, just for clarity, are not a threshold. It's just a notation on your evacuation form. So your evacuation would have to be for life safety, or to the right-of-way. I don't think I made that very clear in the beginning. The evacuation may be due to mechanical or maintenance issues. For example, the train loses power and the passengers are evacuated onto the right-of-way. However, if passengers are removed for a similar situation to a platform, that would not meet the reporting requirement. And if passengers are moved from a train to, say, a rescue train without going onto the right-of-way, then that would not be considered evacuation. Some life safety situations could be bomb threats, bombings, smoke events, fires, fuel fumes, etc. Okay, so how do we create these S&S-20 reports? As we showed you back in the navigation, you would click on your records menu option, choose the NTD safety packages options, then choose the year that you want. Actually skip that in this slide. You choose the year that you want. Then the first thing you do is click on that NTD safety forms button in the upper right hand corner of your screen, and then you would click on the button you see here, File New S&S-20. If you have an event that includes 2 or more transit modes from your agency, how do you choose to report which mode to report under? If the event involved your rail mode and one of your non-rail mode vehicles, a train and a bus, for example, you would choose the rail mode. All right, so as we get started in our reports, the first 2 screens, Setup Screen 1 and Setup Screen 2, basically act as a wizard to help you determine if the event meets reporting thresholds. Screen 1 will capture the date of the event, the mode and type of service, and the event type. This is just a snapshot of Setup Screen 1. So as we continue, for the event types on Setup Screen 1, the first one that's listed is collision, since that's the most common. This includes suicides or attempted suicides where a transit vehicle impact is involved. Derailments are the next choice, both mainline and yard again. And if a derailment results in is a result of a collision, you would report that as a collision, not a derailment. For an event to be considered a fire, there must be flame suppression. Non-fire smoke events or the smell of something burning which meet another threshold are reported as an other safety event. But for an event to be considered a hazmat situation, it not only has to meet a threshold, but the situation would have had to have required specialized cleanup, such as a hazmat team sent in to clean up that environment. Acts of God refer to acts of nature such as hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, snow, ice storms. I'm going to see if I can advance here because I see we're getting questions in the question box, and obviously James can't answer questions if he's advancing my screens for me.
And I'm advancing the screen. So James is answering
okay,
the
great.
questions. Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm answering them as I can, but a bunch just came in all at once, so I'll get to them.
He's been on it.
All right. Sorry about that. I just saw them out of the corner of my eye, and I thought James was advancing me. So, okay. Thank you, Lori. So there are, regarding the security events, there are 2 categories of security events. The system security events, such as arson, bomb threats, bombings, suspicious packages, etc. Basically, these are events that would affect the transit system itself. Personal security events, such as assault, robbery, homicide, attempted suicides, and suicides, etc. Are those that affect 1 or more persons. Just as with your other event types, the event has to meet a reporting thresholds. Suicides and attempted suicides that are not as a result of a collision are reported on this selection as well, your personal security event. And last is the other safety events. This is sort of our catch-all for miscellaneous options. These are obviously events that don't fit into our other categories that we've just discussed, such as evacuation due to a smoke or a fall resulting in a fatality. You'll notice that the injuries of 2 or more people has an asterisk there. For other safety event, as James mentioned, when 2 or more people are injured, and that's the only threshold, they get bumped up to a major event. However, your other safety events could have only 1 injury on them, but then there would have to be another threshold, such as an evacuation or a fatality. So the next screen you would see would be Setup Screen 2, as this continues on the wizard portion of your forms. Excuse me. So here you're going to answer some basic questions. It asks the number of injuries for your event, the number of fatalities in your event, if there was a substantial damage or not, and then it asks you the evacuation question as you see worded here. All right, so if the event were a collision, we're going to go through reporting a collision since that's the most frequent event that's reported. So typically when you do a collision, you're going to have 4 other questions that will appear on Setup Screen 2. The first is, were transit vehicles involved in this event? Were transit revenue vehicles or non-revenue rail transit vehicles involved in the event? Beg your pardon. Was the collision at a grade crossing? Because again, that's a threshold. Was the collision an event with a person, with another rail vehicle or a person? Again, that's our automatically reportable threshold. And the other reportable threshold, did the event involve a runaway train? So this is the collision, the screen 2, when you've chosen collision on screen 1, having all the selections that we just mentioned. As with the other events, a non-transit collision must meet a reportable threshold. And here's a couple of examples of non-transit collisions. This is where a transit revenue vehicle is not involved. So again, a private vehicle collides with a pedestrian or another private vehicle or an object in your transit parking lots and a threshold is met. A privately owned vehicle collides with your transit center or the transit station itself or the platform, as it were. Or if a non-revenue rail maintenance equipment, again, not trains or not vehicles, collides with anything or anyone except for a train, it would be reported as a non-transit collision. Remember, if you look back on that table, if that non-revenue vehicle, if a non-revenue train is involved, excuse me, getting my words mixed up. If a train's involved, it's going to be reported as a rail transit collision. So here we're just talking about equipment and maintenance. All right. So this is just a snapshot of the non-transit collision screen, much shortened version than your normal collision screens. Okay, so based on the selections you made on screen 1 and screen 2, the event was either going to be reportable as a major event, or it can come back and tell you that it's not necessarily reportable as a major event. It might be a non-major event, and it may direct you to that screen. If it is reportable, it's going to generate the basic information screen, which will be the next screen we talk about. Okay. So if the event meets the reporting threshold, the basic information screen appears, and the basic information displays the date that you already selected back on screen 1. When you're entering in the time, please notice the format that you'll see under there. You have to use AM and PM designations, even if you use military or the 24-hour clock format. You'll also include the approximate or actual location of the event. You'll also include the geographic location, the longitude and latitude, which is required for each report. You are permitted here to enter numbers, decimal point, and a negative symbol for the longitude. Please use a minimum of 4 decimal places at least. And if you do not have the coordinates at hand, you can use a variety of any internet resources. One such site is latlong.net. On the next screen, you'll see an example of the latlong.net screen. You can see there's an option up there for address to lat long. You just type in the address here in the red box and then click on Find, and it shows you coordinates which you can then copy and paste right into your report. All right, one of the most critical things on the basic information form is that event description. Excuse me. The event description box is limited to 2,000 characters. If you run over that, it doesn't tell you how far over you are. It just says that you're over, and then you would have to edit it and get it within that limit before you could continue on to the next screen. Event descriptions should be very clear and concise as to what happened. It should, the analyst has to be able to determine what and where and how this event occurred in order to validate the reports properly. They should always include the number of people injured and transported and the types of people, whether they're passengers, people in the other vehicles, etc. Okay, so here's just a good example. I'll let you read that for yourself of an event description that tells us everything that we need to know about that event to help us validate your reports properly. This also prevents us from returning the report for incomplete examples. I literally have gotten reports that says LRV hit auto, and we're not going to accept that. So, all right, let's continue on. Also, in your event descriptions, and this is one of the new things James mentioned, starting in 2019 in December, we do no longer accept personal identifiable information such as driver's license numbers, license plate numbers, badge numbers, addresses, names, etc. You are still encouraged to include the gender and the age, again, because that helps us corroborate the report. Also on the basic information screen, you have boxes for attempted suicide and suicide. This is to help, again, corroborate your other choices later on your injury and fatality forms. There's also a place where you can enter in the name and phone number of someone to contact for additional information, someone that we can contact for additional information regarding the report. You don't need to enter your name if you're putting in the report, and you're also the safety contact, because we would contact you any rate. And as you progress through the reports, your progress bar will show up once you're on this basic information screen and show you how many more subsections you have to complete. You can see that across the top here, that blue bar across the top shows you we're just on the basic information screen right now, and then you'll get to your collision event forms and so on and so forth, according to your selections. Okay. So the first subscreen that we're going to review is the collision event information. Well, actually, before we get to that, let me tell you that there are 4 forms that you're going to usually get. You'll get that collision information form, then you'll get the collision event information, I beg your pardon. Then you'll get the collision information form. After that, you'll get the transit vehicle involved information form, and if other vehicles were involved in this collision, then you'll also have 1 or more other vehicle forms involved. And this is a screenshot of a typical collision event information form. We're going to go through the selections now. Okay, so the first piece of information is captured on the collision event information is the number of transit vehicles that are involved in this collision. This answer would always be yes unless 2 trains were involved in the collision, or yes, 2 trains were involved in the collision, beg your pardon. The collision, the location of the event is also captured, such as is it at a grade crossing or is it not at a grade crossing. Your collision width is also captured. What did you collide with? A person, an object, an animal, so on and so forth. And just a note here, bicyclists, because this is a common mistake, bicyclists are always captured as a collision with a person, just as you would also, a collision with a person would be a collision with a wheelchair or other mobility device. And then the last piece of information on that form is the number of other non-transit or private vehicles that are involved in the collision. Now, the location selection, there's a few things to keep in mind when you're reporting this. That you would choose right-of-way, not grade crossing, with locations such as driveways or parking lot exits and things like that. Very rarely would we select other. About the only other time is when it was actually in a parking lot, which really isn't going to be applicable for a train, obviously. Grade crossings are locations where rail tracks and vehicular traffic and pedestrian paths, as we mentioned, intersect. Again, for streetcar mode, where the rails are inlaid in the street, each intersection is considered a grade crossing. If you report an event that occurred in a non-revenue facility, such as the yard, we do prefer that you, instead of just choosing non-revenue facility, if possible, to identify whether that occurred at a grade crossing or not a grade crossing. It's much more helpful for us and more accurate that way. Okay, again, as I mentioned about the collision with a person, being a bicyclist or mobility device, scooters, mopeds, motorcycles, school buses, dump trucks, so on and so forth, are all reported as a collision with a non-transit motor vehicle. Again, please don't choose other and type in school bus. Okay, okay, a little bit more information on your collision with. If two trains, from the same agency collide, then you're going to choose one of these two rail transit vehicle collisions. If you have a multiple impact collision, you always want to consider the collision with as the first vehicle or object that was impacted. For example, a train collides with a car, and then the car goes on and hits a building. Your collision with selection would be the non-transit motor vehicle selection, but then of course you'd also include within your damages the damage to that building, and you would also include that information because it helps us corroborate the substantial damage. You would include that building damage in your event description. So the last option on there was the number of other vehicles involved. Again, you're not going to include the transit vehicle in this. Sometimes people mistake that for a total number of vehicles, which it is not. It's just the other vehicles that are involved. And let's look at a couple of scenarios here about how many other vehicles you would involve. If car 1 cuts off the LRV, but no contact is made, and the LRV goes on to hit car 2, then the number of other vehicles to report is 1, because only car number 2 had contact. If car number 1 hits car number 2 and then proceeds to hit the LRV, or the streetcar, whatever, then the number of other vehicles to report would be 2, because car 1 and car 2 had contact with each other before the other vehicle made contact with the train. Again, just noting that this is not a total number of vehicles. Okay, so this is your screenshot of the collision information form. So just as we've done in the past, we're going to go through each of the selections and touch on these high points as we go through this section. So the collision information screen captures the conditions at the time of the event at the scene. The weather is captured at the time of the collision, whether it was clear, raining, snowing, etc. And this also includes our new tunnel selection. Under the lighting, the twilight section is used to refer to both dawn and dusk when it's not full light or full dark out. And please be sure that your lighting corroborates the AM and PM designations that you've used in your time on the basic information screen. If the collision occurred in a tunnel or at an indoor facility, then you would select indoors. And this was changed from indoors. You may have remembered it used to say artificial lighting, but many people confused artificial lighting with street lamps, so we just changed it to indoors. All right. So also on the collision information form is the rail alignment, and we're just going to talk about two here that sometimes seems to be a source of confusion. The first is shared with other vehicles, controlled access to other non-rail vehicles. So you would use this selection when the rail alignment is a semi-exclusive right-of-way with controlled grade crossings for vehicular traffic. The second selection we'll talk about is the non-exclusive right-of-way shared with vehicles or pedestrians. This would be selected when the rail alignment consists of rail tracks that, again, are embedded in the street and cars can drive over them or pedestrians can walk over them in the same area that the transit vehicles travel. Neither of these options would be selected if the mode was heavy rail, since heavy rail alignment would always be an exclusive right-of-way, except for 2 agencies that we have that have exclusions for that. Excuse me. For the grade crossing control device selection, please ensure the selection is consistent with the location that you chose back on the 4th screen, the location. The collision event information screen. Again, be sure to choose not applicable if the collision did not occur at a grade crossing. So that's the end of the collision event, the collision information screen. The next screen to appear would be the rail transit train involved form. So one screen will appear for each train that's involved in the collision. Therefore, if 2 trains are from the same agency collide, you would complete one transit vehicle information form for each train. There are identifiers on each of these forms, so you can clearly identify vehicle train 1 and train 2. There are also add and delete buttons. If you accidentally entered in an extra train and you didn't mean to, sometimes people do this when they mean there's 2 cars in the consist. They'll put 2 trains by accident. So you have a delete button. When you get to that second train, you can just click on delete to get rid of that form. So then we see a screenshot of the rail transit train involved form. So similarly as we've been doing, we're going to go through each of the options here. So the transit train involved form captures the fleet vehicle that was involved in the collision, the vehicle action at the time of the collision. Was it stopped? Was it turning, etc.? The collision type, which is the part of the transit vehicle that was hit, reported from the viewpoint of the transit vehicle, and the speed of the speed at the time of the collision, or estimated speed at the time of the collision. And then finally, the runaway train question, and then it will ask you, if you do say yes, it'll ask you if operators were involved or not. And then the tow away question, if the vehicle was towed away due to, I take that back, that is not, I'm sorry, that's in my, my verbiage, but it's not on the form. We don't collect the train being towed, so I apologize if you noted that down. Take it back out. All right, so let's look at this form in more detail. So the new fleet involved section integrates with your agency's most current A30 revenue vehicle inventory form. There are separate A30 forms for each mode and type of service that you report for. With this integration, you will choose a vehicle from the list of available options for that mode. When the selection is made and the vehicle manufacturer and the fuel type are already part of that, that line item and will automatically show up on the screen, eliminating possible incorrect selections there. If you're operating a new manufacturer that's not in your A30, you will have an option to enter that. However, it does not backfill or update the A30 automatically. It's just being entered into this form and not updating the A30. So if you have questions about the A30, of course, you can contact us or you can contact the annual analyst, especially if you need changes. You're better off talking to the annual analyst if you need to make a change because they corroborate those changes. Okay, so let's look at this fleet involved section a little bit more. So this is how that screen looks, the fleet involved section. You see that there's an existing fleet button and a new fleet button. So this is a screenshot of what you would see after you clicked on the existing fleet button. The grid displays, again, the available options from your A30 based on the mode and type of service that you are reporting for, with columns representing the vehicle, revenue vehicle inventory ID, the agency fleet ID, the total number of vehicles, the vehicle type, model, the year manufactured, and the fuel type. Some agencies may have many selections. so that you can use one of the 4 filter boxes that you see here so that you can restrict yours just to a certain manufacturer or whatever you choose. And then to make your selection, you would click on the checkbox, as you see the red arrow pointing to here, make your selection, and then to actually add it into the report, you click on the currently grayed out Add Fleet button. We are going to make a little bit of a change to this. I thought it would be more useful that instead of seeing the total number of vehicles and the active fleet vehicles, that if you actually saw, once it puts it in there, that agency fleet ID, because once you added it, for some reason it gets rid of that column, but we're going to bring that column back because we find that that's more useful to most reporters. Okay, so if the vehicle is not listed within the existing fleet, then you would click on the New Fleet button and make a selection just like you used to do it back in 2019. So out of a list of every possible scenario, you would choose the vehicle type, manufacturer, and fuel type. Again, you would add it in the same way by clicking on that Add Fleet button, and it would add it into the report, but once again, it does not add it to your A30 itself. Okay, so this is a screenshot of after clicking on the Add Fleet button. You see it's put the selection into the report. If you need to make a correction, your finger slipped, you made a wrong choice here, you would click on that red X at the right to remove it, and then you'd start over with your Add Fleet, with your existing fleet or your new fleet selections. Okay, so as we mentioned, the rail transit train involved form captures the number of cars in the train, the number of cars that derailed, if any, the physical action at the time of the collision, and the collision type, which is the area of the vehicle that was impacted. So this diagram shows, the next diagram shows the impact points, again, reported from the aspect of the transit vehicle. We're going to go over in some of these in more detail. Other front impact is used when the front of the transit vehicle is impacted, but not when it would be considered a head-on collision or rear ending. An example would be that the front corner bumper hits another vehicle or an object while it's turning. This would not be the part of the bumper that's on the side, because that would be a side impact, but any part of the bumper on the front. Likewise, other rear impact is used when the transit vehicle is impacted on the rear of the vehicle, but not when it would be considered that the vehicle is rear-ended. And again, example would be if the transit vehicle was backing up and it hit a utility pole or something. Rear-ending and rear-ended are always reported as a pair. And talking about rear-ending and rear-ended, when you have multiple vehicle accidents or chain reaction accidents, they can be a challenge sometimes. Always remember to consider the first impact, including that vehicle that's in the middle. So in this diagram, if vehicle 1 hit vehicle 2, vehicle 1 is rear-ending vehicle 2, so rear of vehicle 2 is rear-ended, excuse me. But then that gets pushed into the train. The train is also reported as rear-ended. And I know that looks like a bus there. I apologize for that. So rear-ending would be the initial impact, and then rear-ended and rear-ended. Okay, we also collect the speed or estimated speed at the time of the collision. And then the last question on that screen is asking if a runaway train was involved. Okay, so that's the train information. Then we move on to the other vehicle involved if another vehicle was involved in your collision. So this, much as the transit vehicle collects information, this collects information about the non-transit vehicle. If more than one other vehicle is involved, you'll have to complete one other vehicle involved form for each motor vehicle or private vehicle that's involved in the collision. So example again, if a transit vehicle causes a multi-car collision, with 2 autos, then 2 other vehicle screens would have to be completed. Again, these also have vehicle identifiers on them, so if you've accidentally included too many or you didn't include enough, you can add a vehicle right from this form or delete a vehicle from this form. So this is a sample of the other vehicle involved form. Less involved than doing the transit vehicle, so it's a lot easier to do this one. So the first thing that's collected is the other vehicle type, and this includes a selection for a commercial rail or Amtrak vehicle. Automobile selection would be used for both cars or passenger vans like Dodge Caravans. However, if it's like a box truck, that's one of the few times you would select other and type in box truck. And then you also again collect the physical action or the movement of the other vehicle at the time of the collision. Then you would also collect the collision type, so the part of the vehicle that was hit from the viewpoint of this other vehicle. And then finally, the tow-away question. To answer yes or no accordingly, was the vehicle towed away from the scene due to disabling damage as a result of the collision? Again, remember, if the vehicle is towed just because the person wanted it towed or the person's intoxicated and the police officer is not going to let them drive it, or because they're injured and they're taken to the hospital and there's nobody to drive their car away, that's not tow away for disabling damage. All right, and then finally, if there are any injuries or fatalities involved in the collision, then you will get an injury form for each person injured and a fatality form for each fatality. These two have identifiers on them so that you can count the number of people. So if you, and this would be corroborated by your event description. So if you say 10 injuries, then we're going to look for 10 injury forms. If you didn't add enough or you added too many, again, there's delete person buttons where you can add or delete person buttons. Also, there are 2 categories of persons on this form: persons inside the vehicle and persons outside of the vehicle. Be careful when you're making the selection, obviously, especially when you were reporting operator injuries. The operator is listed as both outside of vehicles and inside of vehicles. So obviously in most collisions, you would want the operator as being inside the vehicle. Transit vehicle rider is the correct choice for passengers boarding or alighting from the train, or if a person is surfing on top of the train or riding between cars. Even though that may sound odd, they're still considered on the train, and so they're captured as riders. Pedestrian walking along the road is also a proper selection for walking along the tracks. In fact, it used to actually say tracks, and they changed it to road, but when it said tracks, we also collected road. At any rate, that's kind of a universal, they're walking along the tracks or the roads. Pedestrian other is the best choice for indicating that there were people sitting, laying down, standing on the tracks. On the injury form, it also collects the nature of the injury. Was it a serious injury or was it a non-serious injury? And then there's also a checkbox for you to indicate whether the person was transported or not. Now, currently we've indicated some or instituted some validation checks. So if you choose an injury and you don't choose serious, it's going to make you check the transported box before you can leave the form. I was going to say something else there, but also on this form you have the attempted suicide on your injury forms, your suicide buttons on your fatality forms, and on both of those forms you have trespasser selections. A couple notes again about trespassers. Just as James mentioned with attempted suicides, if there are police reports or eyewitness statements, etc., to account for the fact that the person was trespassing, then you would want to include that information in your event description. It's also especially helpful for us when we have to do searches for things to to include the word trespasser or trespassing in your event description. Trespassing events are not reported on the event level, which means trespassing itself is not a category, it's not an event type, and it's not a threshold in and of itself. Rather, we collect trespasser injuries or fatalities. So here's a couple of examples when determining trespassers. A person jumps onto the tracks, perhaps in front of a vehicle, or they go under a platform, or are on an exclusive right-of-way. Those are all considered trespassing. However, if a person falls or is pushed onto the tracks, or as the person is crossing in a non-exclusive right-of-way, they're not considered trespassing. These examples pertain to rail alignments, but a trespasser could also be in an unauthorized area of the station, such as an employee-designated area. So this is a screenshot of the fatality form. Notice with the red arrows, again, you have operators outside vehicles and operators inside vehicles. On the fatality form, on the next screen, you'll see the same designations there. The difference on this form, of course, is that it says attempted suicide rather than suicide. Okay, now this is really just a pause screen, because what we're going to do at this point, you can continue to ask questions in the question and answer box, and James is going to take over from this point, and I'll man the question and answer box. Thank you, everyone. James?
Thanks, Ann. See if I can get control here.
I'm standing by if it doesn't work. Is it going? Here, wait. It's so weird because I don't see the controls on the bottom of the screen anymore either. They totally disappeared. It's very, oh, try now. Do you see them? Okay. No. Why is that happening?
On it, but...
I know. Here, one more time. Wait, I went over here.
Lori.
I'll just do it. Here.
Okay.
All right, wait. Stop moving the mouse. Okay. I'm going to take back control. Oh, I don't know. I guess I did. Okay. I will be, say beep, you know, when it's time to change the slide. Just kidding.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so you can go ahead and, okay, there we go. Evacuations for life safety means there's imminent danger to all people in that environment. Reportable evacuations are also to the rail right-of-way. Each evacuation type includes both customer self-evacuations and transit or official direction evacuations. Evacuations can be part of almost any event type, but are least common in collisions. An evacuation requires all passengers and or employees to depart a transit vehicle or facility. These may be for safety or a security event. This includes events that occur off property but affect the transit system. For example, a gas leak or fire on an adjacent property that caused the RTA to evacuate a nearby station. You also see a few examples of what is not an evacuation listed below. This is a screenshot of the evacuation subform. The first question on the evacuation event screen is to confirm that the evacuation was for life safety, to the rail right-of-way, or self-evacuation. You may select as many options as needed. Include a brief description of the evacuation, including the cause. The what was evacuated question is used to indicate what was actually evacuated. One choice would be vehicle vessel, which would be the train. Do not report the location of the train at the time. Once the evacuation subform is generated in a report, it cannot be deleted. So if an evacuation is incorrectly included, the entire report would need to be deleted and a new report entered without the evacuation. You also cannot add an evacuation subform to a report. All derailments of transit trains on mainline track or in the yard are reported, even if the train is not in revenue service and regardless of any other major threshold. On the derailment form, you'll be asked to indicate if this is a mainline or yard derailment. If maintenance equipment such as a high rail vehicle derails, you will report these as they are also automatically reportable. Be sure to select one rail transit vehicle involved, even though this generates the train form, and not the other vehicle form. Reminder, derailments resulting from a collision are reported as collisions, not a derailment. This is a screenshot of the derailment form. As you can see, the form collects the type of derailment, where the derailment occurred, the number of trains involved, the location of the derailment, and the configuration. This is a screenshot of the derailment rail transit details form, which is much like the collision information screen, collecting lighting, alignment, and conditions. This is a screenshot of the derailment rail transit train involved form. Notice the same integration of the 830 form, which is completed just as we discussed under the collision section. The form also collects information about the train involved, including if the derailment was due to a runaway train. Reporting fires on the S&S-20 that meet one or more major event thresholds. To be defined as a fire, the incident must have had fire suppression equipment or personnel involved to contain the fire and must meet a major event threshold. Without these thresholds, a fire requiring suppression is reported on the S&S-20 non-major summary report. Arson is reported on screen 1 as a system security event, not a fire. The presence of smoke only is reported as an other safety event. This is a screenshot of the fire event details screen. If the fire is in or on the rail vehicle, including in the engine, wheel area, or anywhere on the outside, this would be reported as in or on vehicle. Report the type or cause of the fire. For the fuel type selection, if you choose the location of the fire as in or on vehicle, then you would report the fuel type of the vehicle. Acts of God are natural and unavoidable catastrophes that affect the transit environment. Select all locations of property damage, injuries, fatalities, and evacuations. You will be able to choose more than one option. For example, the location should indicate the property or properties that were damaged and not the geographic location, such as the name of the city. This is the screenshot of the Act of God screen. When reporting hazardous material spills, the spill must meet a reportable threshold and have caused imminent danger to life, health, or environment, and required specialized cleanup. There's a few examples there below. This is a screenshot of the hazardous material spill screen. Notice you report the location of the spill and the type of material spilled. There are two categories of security events on screen 1, system security and personal security events, which must meet one or more thresholds. System security events occur on transit property and affects the transit system as a whole. Personal security events happen to individuals on transit property or those boarding or alighting a transit vehicle. This is the form used to report attempted suicide or suicide when the event does not involve contact with a train. This is a screenshot of the system security event screen. You may notice that there is an other system security event option on this form. This would be to capture security events that do not meet any other category. For example, shots fired at or objects thrown at a vehicle. This is a screenshot of the personal security event screen. You will notice that there is an other personal security event option for events that do not fit into other categories, such as when a person is transported due to being tased by the police. The final major event type is other safety events. This is your miscellaneous category. These events must meet one of the following thresholds: 1 or more fatalities, 2 or more injured, either serious or non-serious, substantial damage, an evacuation, or involved a runaway train. Please note you may report an other safety event with 1 injury if another threshold is met. Here's some examples. This is a screenshot of the other safety event screen. Excuse me. Let's review saving, submitting, and editing. At any point from the basic information screen on, the system automatically saves your report. So if you close the report without saving or submitting, these auto-save reports become pending reports, which are stored as a task on the task menu option. When you're ready to complete the report, click on the task menu option and you will see a listing of each task. Major event report task will appear with S&S-20 in the title. Just click on the task and the system will return you to the screen you were on when you close the report. Complete the report and save and submit, or if you no longer need the report, you can choose delete instead. Save and submit options appear when you're in view form mode. If you do not see a save or submit button, click on the view form button and scroll to the bottom. Once you click on save, the report is saved and is given an event number at the top of the report. The report will stay open so you can review it. When you submit a report, the report will close and return you to the dashboard. Submitting the report releases the report to the validation analyst for review and comment. It also notifies the analyst that a report has been created. Otherwise, we may never know when it has been created. If we see an unsubmitted report and it is past the due date, we will contact you to submit the report. As a reminder, unsubmitted reports are excluded from the event, injury and fatality counts in the S&S-20 CEO Certification forms. Analysts may return a report to you for questions or to make corrections. The system will send the last modified user 1 email for each report that is returned. After you make a correction, be sure to save and submit. As mentioned earlier, the comment box is in all forms except the S&S-20 CEO Certification. The box at the bottom of the form is used by a safety analyst to ask for clarification or for a change to be made. Each time the form is returned, it is time-stamped. Users may also respond to a request using the comment box. However, you do not need to comment that you made the change. We will see that in the form. If the analyst asks you to add a statement to the event description, please enter that statement into the description and not the comment box. This is a screenshot of the other safety event of the comment box. Excuse me. When reviewing or editing your reports, it is important to learn how to move around the document. Here's a list of available button tools, though each may not be available on every form. One button I would like to point out is the Jump to Section button. This button allows you to jump to a specific screen instead of using the next or back buttons, and it's the only way you'll be able to edit a report. The View Form button shows the entire report for review and contains the Jump to buttons and Save and Submit buttons. When you open the report, the first screen is the Setup Summary view. This screen is the only place you can edit the date of the event. Also, if your report does not include any injuries or fatalities, this screen is the only place where you can add them. Then you would click on Next, which displays your report in view form mode. At this point, you can continue to use Next to go to each screen, or you can click on one of the Jump to Section buttons. This also enables the editing mode. As a reminder, Save and Submit only appear in view form mode. A moment ago, I mentioned how to add injuries or fatalities. If there are not any in the report. However, if there are injuries or fatalities in the report and you need to increase or decrease the number, you can jump to the injury or fatality section and use the Add or Delete Persons button. If you choose Delete Person, it will delete the person you are currently viewing. Similarly, you can increase or decrease the number of transit or non-transit vehicles in a report by again jumping to the appropriate section and click on Add Vehicle or Delete Vehicle. Be sure to click on Save and Submit after making your changes. If you delete a report that was not requested by your analyst, please notify your S&S analyst. Not only do we need to know why the report was deleted, it saves the analyst from trying to locate which report was deleted when our tracking sheets show a different number than the NTD screen. That concludes the presentation, and we'll allow for a few more questions if anybody has any. If you don't get a chance to ask your questions or prefer to ask it in the question, please feel free to contact any of us after the presentation.
I'm going to jump in for just say one thing, and hopefully Ms. Durrell is still online. It looks like she is. I saw the question you asked. Says SSO asked recently why FTA doesn't want collisions with an object in an exclusive right-of-way with minimal damage or no damage and no injuries. And you asked for a response that you can include. Now, James is right when in his response that it doesn't meet a reporting threshold, but one other little piece of information that might be helpful, and this is just because I've been involved with the program much longer than James has, and not slating James at all. He's very good at what he does. But originally when this first started, to my knowledge, it was to reduce the burden on the transit agency so they didn't have to report every little thing that happened, every time a train hit a piece of wood or debris or something that was on the tracks. What I'm more concerned about in your responses said to clarify, I assume you're meaning the SSO, has been requiring you to report them. And we were curious about the exclusive right-of-way. Well, as far as NTD is concerned, you only need to report to us what meets NTD reporting thresholds, and those events that you described would not meet reporting thresholds. You may have to report this event to the State Safety Oversight Agency, but not to NTD. And even in their reporting, that wouldn't meet a reporting threshold by their thresholds either. Now, the state, and this, I'll just clarify this also, because I know a lot of you are dealing with SSOR changes or changes from your SSO to 2019 data because they had to get their data reports in, their report validated. And the SSOs, even though you both are reporting under Part 674, there are different thresholds for the state reporting and NTD reporting. So that could be a point of some confusion, and all I'll say about that is if you want some clarity on that or more details about what their requirements are versus our requirements, again, as James just mentioned, please contact either one of us and we'll be happy to discuss that with you. With one caveat, if you have questions about the SSOR program itself, then you want to call the SSOR help desk because we can't help with that interface. So anything else, you can go ahead and certainly put in the question box.
We'll wait another minute to see if anybody starts typing.
Okay.
We got a thank you from Melissa.
Oh, thank you, Melissa. You're welcome.
Anyone else? Don't be shy. Well, I guess rather than just sit here and listen to dead air, they have your email addresses and they can ask you questions at any time after. So unless there's an objection, I'm just going to wrap this up. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah,
okay.
Sounds good.
All right. So thank you to everyone. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I still don't know what exactly is going on with my computer, but as most of us know, we're not in our usual environments. So considering that, I think it went well. So thanks for your patience and thank you for participating. Especially thank you to Anne and James for your presentation and your patience as well. Reminder to everyone, you should be getting an email with an invitation to fill out an evaluation. NTI really appreciates your feedback, so just take a couple of minutes. And everyone be safe and stay healthy. Bye.
Thanks, Laurie. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.